Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone about our meeting format. Tonight's Planning Commission meeting is being held in person and online. Commissioners, Planning Department staff, and members of the public are attending in the Wheat Ridge City Hall and also by way of the Zoom platform. Members of the public who are not present and wish to make any comments may participate virtually by joining through Zoom, either on a device or by calling in. A Zoom meeting link and dial-in information can be found on wheatridgespeaks.org. In addition to being online via Zoom, we are also broadcasting this meeting on Channel 8 and wheatridgespeaks.org. When it is time for public comment, those who wish to comment on our Zoom connection use the raise your hand button. If you are dialing in, press star 9 to raise your hand and star 6 to unmute your phone. If you plan to speak online tonight, please keep background noise to a minimum. If you do not plan to speak, we recommend you simply view the meeting by watching on Channel 8 or wheatridgespeaks.org. I would now like to call to order the City of Wheat Ridge Planning Commission meeting. May I please get a roll call of members?
Jonathan Shelkey. Here. Christine Disney.
Here.
Daniel Gravy.
Here.
Patrick Quinn.
Here.
Will Kearns.
Here.
Michael Moore.
Here.
Sierra Quiones. And Krista Holleb is absent.
The next order on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is determining the order of tonight's agenda. Anyone have any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda stands as follows. Next, we will approve the minutes from August 16, 2021. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, that will stand as public. All right, all those in favor of approving those minutes?
Motion approved 7-0.
Next, we need to approve the minutes from the third and are there any changes to those?
Nope, sorry. Motion passed 6-0 with one abstaining. Oh, Christine, you need to vote. You need to vote. There we go. 6-0 with one abstaining.
All speakers are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes. Speakers may donate to the not. They will come to speak. Is there anyone?
Nobody on Zoom.
Thank you. I will close public forum. Tonight, we have one. If you comment during the public hearing tonight, make sure you identify your hearing. Introduce
Oh, I got it backwards. Okay, there we go. Case number WZ 2405 is an application for approval of a specific development plan for the purpose of developing a 2-story Primrose School building containing a daycare center, preschool, and outdoor play areas. The subject site is located on the west side of Clear Creek Drive and south of West 40th Avenue and Clear Creek Drive intersections within the Clear Creek Crossing Plan development known as Planning Area 6 of Clear Creek Crossing. It is a part of a large block 4, Lot 1 of the Clear Creek Crossing Block 4 replat, approved in 2022, which included platted access easements defining the site's shape. Block 4 is currently being replatted as a part of a Block 4 replat C, which will create unique lots for the daycare and other proposed developments in the area.
I will say that in the presentation, so let's see if I get it right. Thank you. My name is Scott Cutler, planner with City Wheat Ridge Community Development Department. This is case number WZ2405, which is a request for approval of a specific development plan for the construction of a daycare center at 3905 Clear Creek Drive in the Clear Creek Crossing mixed-use development. Would like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and this presentation. Properties within the city of Wheat Ridge and all appropriate notification and posting requirements have been met. Therefore, Planning Commission has jurisdiction to hear this case. Subject site is located on the west side of Clear Creek Drive, south of the Clear Creek Drive and 40th Avenue intersection within Planning Area 6. Subject site is currently vacant. The Hampton Inn site, which was approved a couple of years ago, is just to the northwest and is currently under construction. And then the recently completed Outlook 2 Table Mesa apartments are further northwest, and those were completed actually last week. Final CO in that project. And then the hospital campus is across Clear Creek Drive and 40th Avenue to the north. And the Lifetime Center is to the south, and then the site is currently vacant. The internal roadway system and utility infrastructure connecting Hampton and Lifetime on the west side of Clear Creek Drive were completed in late 2022. Like I said, the subject site is located within the Clear Creek Crossing Planning Area 6, and the zoning is planned mixed-use development, which is shown in green. This is also called the Harvest District, which denotes it as a commercial sub-district within the development. And the site is surrounded by the Clear Creek Crossing development on all sides. This request for the STP approval is the second step in a two-part approval process pertaining to planned developments. First step occurred in 2018 when the Planning Commission and City Council approved the Clear Creek Crossing Plan Mixed-Use Outline Development Plan, which established the zoning for the site. And then the zone change also included approval of a vision book, which established the intended design and architectural themes and materials, and a design pattern book that includes the more substantive design regulations. An architectural control committee was established specifically for this development to ensure compliance with the design pattern book, third-party review, consistency across the project, and to conduct schematic design review prior to the city's planning review. It's comprised of members representing both the developer and the city, and the ACC provided their recommendation of approval. The applicant is proposing to build a two-story daycare center, about 14,500 square feet in size, 2 outdoor play areas, some connections to the private streets within the development and access to the signalized intersections nearby, and a parking area within the Denver water easement, which I'll show in just a second. Daycare centers, including preschools, are permitted in Planning Area 6 of Clear Creek Crossing, and I'll show all of this in more detail in the next slide. The site also takes into consideration adequate vehicular access, planning area connectivity, and pedestrian connections. Starting with access, the vacant 1.3 acre site is proposed to be developed with a daycare center shown on the star on the map. There's 2 access points proposed into the site, one at the frontage on Crossing Drive, which is a private street, and one connecting to the intersection at the Hampton Inn to the northwest. The slide is really just meant to give everyone a bigger picture of what's going on and what's been built so far within the area with the street network and all the sites completed, under construction, and under review. And all of this area is considered to be Block 4 of the Clear Creek Crossing development and it is currently being replatted right now to create lots for each individual building. Dashed line across the site, it's a little faint, but just next to the star, shows the extent of the 80-foot Denver water easement, where buildings are prohibited, but parking and landscaping is permitted. This is the site plan for the site. A building is located central to the site and surrounded by a looped drive and parking. Building location is shown in blue. 2 access points are proposed into the site, one at the northwest corner, and then one at the southeast onto an extension of Crossing Drive that will eventually tie into future commercial development to the south. Crossing Drive is a private street that is under review to include a wide pedestrian walkway connecting the hospital campus to the future commercial developments south of the site. Coordination is ongoing. That street's already built, but the sidewalks will actually get wider as part of that project, and those improvements will be built by the overall developer. The SDP shows 50 proposed parking spaces, which are placed in front of the building within the Denver water easement, and this amount of parking complies with the code for daycare uses and the amount of staff on site. Parking area also includes sidewalks, allowing pedestrian access from the site to the private streets and the signalized intersections. Project exceeds the minimum requirements for 20% of the lot to be landscaped. It's actually a bit higher. It includes 2 outdoor fenced play areas on either side of the building. And then the site is also surrounded by other landscaped areas, including those along Clear Creek Drive, which will be maintained by the Metro District of the area. The architectural style is driven by the Clear Creek Crossing Design Pattern Book and Vision Book, which call for a modern agrarian aesthetic that blends traditional forms and materials with a modern feel, and it also requires strong attention to be paid to the pedestrian realm. This building is 2 stories. Facades are primarily comprised of fieldstone and fiber cement board and batten siding with a shingled roof. These materials actually match the nearby apartments. Materials will carry over to all sides of the building, resulting in 4-sided architecture. The stone base helps to anchor the building and enhance the entrances. The roofs are gabled with some overhangs to reflect a more residential and agrarian feel. The slide shows the front elevations facing the parking area on the top, and the portion facing the private drive on the west on the bottom. And then these are the side elevations as well. Since Wheat Ridge is not a full-service city, we did send the application on referral to outside agencies, including fire, water, sanitation, and completed our review as well. No objections, and coordination is ongoing with the districts, including final approval from Denver Water across their easement. Civil construction documents are nearing approval, and the plat is under review for the entire Block 4 area to create lots for each user. And a recommended condition of approval has been added to denote that minor changes may be required to the site plan to coordinate this development with the surrounding infrastructure improvements being constructed by the master developer. Before the hearing, the property was posted for 15 days. Letters were sent to property owners and residents within 1,000 feet of the site. The project was posted on Wheat Ridge Speaks, and we did receive 1 letter of support from the Intermountain Health Hospital just across the street. Overall, we find that SDP is consistent with the ODP and is in compliance with all of the standards for the Clear Creek Crossing development. It's consistent with the purpose of a planned development, and all agencies conserve the property. Therefore, we are recommending approval of this specific development plan, case number WZ2405, with conditions. No presentation from the applicant, but they are here and available for questions if you have any. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. I will now open the hearing for public comment. Those who wish to comment on our Zoom connection, use the raise your hand button. If you are dialing in, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute your phone. When you come, oh, nobody's coming to the podium. Has anyone signed up to speak? Anybody on Zoom? All right. All right, since there's no one here to speak, I will now close the citizens forum. Would the applicant like to make any comments at this time? Nope. Okay, all right. I will now entertain questions from the commissioners. We'll start with Commissioner Shelkey.
I was just curious, is this a franchise facility?
Hi, my name is Jeff Farrell with Emory Development, I'm the development company. It is a franchise facility, and the franchisees are here tonight, Bryce and Emily Dirk. So, sitting over here.
And what was the name of the company?
So, Embry Development is my company, Emory Development Company. Yes,
All
sir.
right.
Can I get the address?
Of the facility?
Of the,
Oh, 4747 Williams Drive,
Williams Drive?
Williams Drive, in Georgetown, Texas, 78632.
Thank you.
Commissioner Quinn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Commissioner Moore?
The only question I have, and it may be a little bit more related to less the building, have any traffic studies been done?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There's a master traffic study that's done by the overall development Evergreen, and we've also done our own traffic study for our specific facility that was approved,
Okay.
or part of the SDP application.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gravy?
No questions.
Commissioner Quinones?
No questions.
Commissioner Kearns?
Yeah, a couple.
Is your mic on?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm looking at this site plan in regards to pedestrian circulation, especially pickup and drop off before school and after school. I see a crosswalk on the northwest driveway access, but I don't see a crosswalk on the southeast driveway access. Is one planned or?
I can speak to that one.
Okay.
Yeah, so yes, that's actually a level crossing that's proposed on Crossing Drive. So that's the project that's not part of this development that's being coordinated and actually I think coming to Planning Commission pretty soon. But essentially it's that road is being rebuilt to have a level driveway crossing at that location. So it's actually a safer crossing than a crosswalk in the street.
Okay, so West Crossing Drive doesn't exist yet.
It exists, but in a kind of temporary form. So it's
Okay.
getting rebuilt as like a real street.
Okay. And then, I guess, do you have any plans for if there's like pickup and drop off congestion? I always see congestion around schools during pickup and drop off hours, especially in the actual access, the actual school driveway. Is there any sort of, I noticed there's a private street behind the school. Is that accessible for people to potentially pick up and drop off kids?
Not the street behind the school.
Okay.
All drop-offs will be done in the parking lot. And I don't know, maybe Bryce or Emily could speak more to how the operationally, how that works. But in terms of the picking up and dropping off. Sorry.
Hi, Emily Dirk, address 4005 West 35th Avenue. The pickup and drop off time is going to be variable, so there's not like a start and end time. Being a daycare center, it's going to range. So unlike a public school where it's a very definite drop off and pickup, parents are going to be coming and going sort of throughout the morning and throughout the afternoon and coming into the parking lot only.
Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Any additional questions from the commissioners? All right, thank you. You may be seated. Seeing that there are no further questions, I will now close the public hearing. Commissioner Quinones, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve case number WZ 2405, a request for approval for a specific development plan for a Primrose School on property located within Planning Area 6 of the Clear Creek Crossing planned mixed-use development at 3905 Clear Creek Drive.
May I have a second?
I think there's more to it.
Okay,
There's
need
more
to
to the
read
motion, the
all of it?
entire thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So for the following reasons, the specific development plan is consistent with the purpose of a planned development as stated in section 26301 of the Code of Laws. The specific development plan is consistent with the intent and purpose of the outline development plan. The proposed uses are consistent with those approved by the outline development plan. All responding agencies have indicated that they serve the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense. The specific development plan is in substantial compliance with the applicable standards set forth in the outline development plan and with the city's adopted design manuals, with the following condition. Minor site adjustments may be required to the civil construction plans to coordinate this development with surrounding infrastructure improvements and the replat.
May I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Commissioners, please vote.
Motion approved, 7-0.
Very good. Thank you very much for attending tonight. Next on the agenda is old business. Is there any old business we need to discuss?
No old business, Madam Chair.
And new business?
Just one moment. It's connecting. Just give it a sec. All right. Something. Yes. We're just sitting here. Okay. Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. Tonight, we are, as part of our new business, we're going to talk about the Lutheran Legacy Campus zoning update. And so I'm here tonight with Scott Cutler, one of our senior planners, and we're actually representing a larger city team that's been working on this for several months. All right. So we realized that the agenda packet for this item was rather large. There's a lot of reading material in it, a lot to digest. But for the presentation tonight, we're going to go ahead and keep it at a pretty high level and focus on some of the big takeaways. I'm going to share where we are in the process, and then we'll talk about how we've organized the new zoning, and then hit on some of our key topic areas for tonight, which include the open space, perimeter, center of campus, permitted uses, and the process. So we'll go through the whole presentation, and then we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. So as I mentioned, this has been a many months process, and it began even before our first council study session on the topic in April of this year, when council gave us the direction to implement the Lutheran Legacy Campus Master Plan. And so with that, we set off, embarked on this new adventure, and we actually have held 3 Let's Talk open houses on this matter. So the rezoning concept was integrated into 3 of the open houses that we also held for the city plan. And then also one of those also served as the neighborhood meeting for the campus rezoning, and that was the last one in September. It's also been discussed at 3 city council study sessions and 1 planning commission study session. So, as hopefully you know, unless you live in a closet, just this week, voters approved the charter amendment to restrict heights around the perimeter of the campus in exchange for allowing taller heights in the center. And that was part of the master plan's vision. And so we are happy tonight to be presenting this post-election. All right, so this will essentially, well, let me start off with, thank you for your notes. As a reminder, it's the zoning regulations that implement the planning vision of the master plan. And so we're writing the rules that translate the master plan vision into the built environment that the community wants to see. We are doing that by creating a new section in the zoning code, and this will be designated Article 14. We already have 4 mixed-use zone districts in our code, but we're creating a custom mixed-use zone district specifically for the campus. Some of the regulations should look familiar, as they are much of our mixed-use code could easily apply to the Lutheran Legacy campus. And then many of the regulations are customized to implement the master plan. And again, those include the central trade-off. You've heard from us before on that, which is to ensure the perimeter functions as a buffer, and it integrates the existing assets and allows more flexibility on the interior of the site. So the memo for tonight's meeting is organized in the same way that the municipal code is organized, with a different section and heading for each topic area and set of regulations. And those are listed here on this slide. We also have the draft ordinance is in your packet. It is still a work in progress, so, but you will see on the top of each one, the headings in red indicate what that describes and what the overall foundation is behind the changes to, if there were any changes to the existing mixed-use code that we used as a basis for the Lutheran Legacy Campus mixed-use district. And so instead of summarizing each section, what we'll do is talk through different topics of areas on the campus. And so with this, I'm going to go ahead, and in this slide, just for reference, you can see the different 4 sub-districts to kind of familiarize yourself with that. And this came out of the master plan. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Scott to get into some of the key topic areas.
Thanks. So the first one, and probably the one we've gotten the most questions about, is open space. And I know we talked about this a little bit at the last study session, but we have more details since then. But taking a regional approach to open space with an emphasis on publicly accessible spaces. That means truly open to the public regardless of land ownership. So that could be owned by the city or more likely owned by a metro district or HOA, which has a perpetual access easement across it. Clear Creek Crossing is actually similar. There's public parkland there that's privately owned but publicly accessible, and that would count. So 20% of the net development site area, that's excluding streets. So that's pretty substantial and higher actually than our other mixed use requirements by double. Additional private open space will also need to be provided in private yards, private amenity spaces for multi-unit residential. There will be landscaping within the streetscape as will be required, and then required parking lot landscaping as well. This is another one, required publicly accessible open space on Dudley Street with connections into the site. And this is actually requiring that there's a publicly accessible park along Dudley Street. Continuing on open space, requiring a regional stormwater system. It's a lot more efficient and a lot more aesthetically pleasing when you have a regional pond as opposed to every building building their own concrete stormwater system. Requiring bicycle and pedestrian connections throughout the site. Requiring coordination with the Rocky Mountain Ditch, with the goal being to retain a trail alongside or near the ditch. And then an analysis of existing trees with a good faith effort to preserve healthy, mature tree canopy. On 30th Avenue, zoning regulates and maintains the existing relationship of the campus to the street. And currently the setback for the hospital is about 80 feet from the back of sidewalk to the building. There's surface parking in that location. There's some landscaping. The master plan expresses the desire to keep that condition so there won't be buildings right on 38th Avenue. The existing detached sidewalk would remain intact. We don't really know if the hospital is going to be reused in whole or in part. And so we really just want to maintain the existing relationships of buildings. The zoning will allow parking to be maintained in that area if that's desired by the developer. But if you can look at the images below, and I think we talked about this last time, any new building will have to be set back the same distance as its height. So if there's a 20-foot building, there's a 20-foot setback. There's a 50-foot building, there's a 50-foot setback. You can also do some tiering in buildings, so pulling back the upper stories and then pushing the lower floors closer to the street. But it's always going to result in a large landscaped buffer along 38th Avenue. In order to ensure that the perimeter serves as a buffer in transition between the campus and the existing adjacent neighborhoods, low-density overlay will be included around the perimeter of the site adjacent to existing low-density neighborhoods. This applies to the first row of development within the campus and will ensure compatibility of land uses and form. City code would typically allow for a 35-foot height limit for residential in this area, but the approved charter amendment will actually limit height in this area to 2.5 stories or 30 feet in order to be more compatible with existing conditions. Allowed uses would also be only what is allowed in our low-density residential zone districts, so single-unit homes, duplexes, accessory buildings, and some civic buildings in open space. And again, this ensures that medium-density uses like townhomes are not immediately bordering the outside of the campus. For buildings within the low-density overlay, we're requiring some design limitations across the board to ensure compatibility. For structures over 2 stories, pitched roofs would then be required, making the third floor more of a smaller partial floor or an attic. Flat and shed roofs are only permitted for 1- and 2-story homes, so you're not going to see the 3-story kind of box flat roof buildings here. And then some additional design requirements to prevent cookie cutter designs, prohibiting adjacent residential structures from having the same floor plan, requiring variety in material and color, requiring some offset so everything's not built in the exact same line, and then requiring building eaves and porches or awnings on fronts of buildings. So again, it's not that tract home style. And then I'll next go over how this overlay will apply to the west side versus the east side of the property. So on the west side, which is parallel to Dudley Street, we are going to require that Dudley Street have on-street parking and a continuous detached sidewalk with street trees along that frontage. Front setback then is 15 feet from the back of the new sidewalk. So in total, that's actually larger than the setback on the west side. Publicly accessible open space, like I mentioned earlier, at least 100 feet wide on Dudley. That's like a double lot to include a pedestrian or bicycle connection. Houses will have their front doors either face Dudley or the open space area. No garage doors facing Dudley. So again, you're having this more active streetscape and not just a wall of garages. Between the buildings, side setbacks minimum of 5 feet. That's typical of our mixed use and our medium to low density residential like R1A, R1C. And then no street connections into the campus. You can do sidewalks, but there's not going to be a through street through there. That was identified in the master plan. And then on the east and south sides, so circled those on the screen, requiring a 30-foot setback for primary structures, meaning a single unit home or duplex from the boundary, which ensures that yards will be adjacent to yards. You're not going to have a large house right on that property line. And that's consistent with what's on the other side of the boundary, which is rear or side yards. Prohibiting rooftop or second story decks where those homes will directly face other homes, so preserving privacy for those existing residents, requiring 15-foot setbacks for a large accessory building like a garage or maybe a 2-story ADU, and then a 5-foot setback for those smaller shed-type buildings. And again, no through-street connections through these areas. Now, the interior of the site, which you can see in purple, will have more variety in uses and building form than on the perimeter. So in the areas where the charter height was lifted successfully, the maximum building height will be 70 feet, 5 stories maximum, only the purple areas. The unshaded areas, everything that's not the yellow low density overlay or the purple interior, the current charter limits of 35 feet still apply. Those aren't changing. They can't get higher and they're not going to get lower, or 50 feet for a civic commercial building use in those unshaded areas. For architecture in the middle of the campus, like the regular mixed-use districts, we're going to require entries to face a street or publicly accessible open space. Buildings will have to be oriented to the street, can't turn their back on open space amenities. Prohibition on slot homes like we have elsewhere in the city. And then the master plan didn't really talk a lot about architecture. So a lot of the building design provisions we apply to other mixed-use code, mixed-use developments will apply here as well. Specifically, parking lots not being located between the building and the street for public or private streets. And that really just encourages a more interesting and pedestrian-oriented street frontage. Only exception being 38th Avenue. That's kind of an existing condition, and we're not going to require buildings to be right on 38th. And I mentioned this many times, but it's really important and mentioned in the plan a lot, is requiring pedestrian and bicycle connections throughout. Sidewalks on both sides of the streets, minimum of 6 feet in width. And that's higher than the city standard. On permitted uses, the memo contained a simplified use chart of what would appear in the code. List is not meant to be overly prescriptive or exhaustive, but rather provide for a range of uses while emphasizing the importance of building form. And a wide range of uses will be allowed in the interior of the campus, aligning with the suitability map provided in the master plan. Within the low density overlay, talked about this a little earlier, will be limited to single unit homes, duplexes or open space, and some civic and institutional uses as well, but no apartments or townhomes. And then the remainder of those zones, 1 and 4, which is kind of the outside of the campus, will allow some additional uses, including townhomes and some other conditional uses. Mix of uses is required in zones 2 and 3. Developer will need to provide at least 2 different use groups as primary uses from the categories of residential, public, civic, and institutional, commercial and retail, hospitality, and office, and that will allow for a true mix of uses in the center of the campus. So you can't just fulfill the requirement by only doing residential. You have to provide a second use. Some uses will require conditional approvals to give some staff some additional leverage, the public some additional protection, because suitability maps from the master plan do not align perfectly with the sub-district boundaries from the master plan. So for example, retail, you can see kind of only is really suitable at that northeast corner and along the parkway at the north. But sub-district 4 is a lot larger. And so with certain designs, it may be appropriate, but not appropriate in all areas of sub-district 4. And so that allows us to review each of those at a case-by-case basis. And back to Jana.
Okay, thanks, Scott. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about process, and the process that we've come up with basically just follows the same structure that we've used for our other mixed-use districts. It's served us well for about a decade, so if it's not broken, don't fix it. In this case, because the site is so large, it will be required to have a concept plan approved prior to any site-specific development. And that's a particularly helpful tool to set up the overall uses in each area, the vehicular and pedestrian circulation, open space, and in this case, the preservation concepts for the Blue House Chapel and the tuberculosis tent. And so as part of that, the concept plan includes a neighborhood meeting and public notice, so there will be opportunity for the public to comment. And then once approved, the concept plan actually gets recorded with the county, and it must be adhered to as the site plans begin to develop. So going into next steps, tonight is your chance to kind of review the draft mixed-use guidelines and the framework that we've provided to you. And based on your feedback, what we'll do is finalize the zoning ordinance and then bring it back to you and City Council for adoption in December and January. And so we do expect that the rezoning of the campus to occur in the spring based on this schedule. And the processing for that rezoning of the campus would also include your review and city council's. So with that, I appreciate your time and attention, and we can now open it up for commissioner questions and comments and discussion.
We'll start with Commissioner Kearns.
No questions?
Commissioner Quinones. Commissioner Gravy.
Thanks. Couple of quick ones. Just curious if you could help me understand a little bit better. And I could probably read this more in depth and think about it, but the section 261403 talks about how it encourages reuse of existing hospital structures. What is it, how is that encouraged? How will the developer be encouraged? Because I fielded a lot of questions from folks about, there's part of that hospital that's like new, and I know that we've talked about this a little bit, but how will they be encouraged by this zoning?
I think that's really all we can say is there are those three, the chapel, the Blue House, and the TB tent, which are required to be addressed. The other ones were not identified in the master plan, but this language, that reuse of legally non-conforming structures shall be permitted and encouraged. That's about as far as we can go to say, you can reuse this building. You don't have to demolish it because otherwise that code section really reads as these are obsolete and you can't repurpose them. So we just don't have anywhere to say that other than here, really.
Yeah, and I guess the fact that it's non-conforming means that if they're able to, make it work with their numbers, they can have a taller building than all the other new ones or something, or I guess that would be part of the incentive.
Yes, so the hospital is allowed to remain. You wouldn't have to remove floors to reuse that building. But once it's gone, it's gone. So you can always repurpose something that is existing.
Yeah. And then just out of curiosity, I know that if you zoom in, this probably wouldn't be an issue, but in that little section of Zone 4 with the overlay coming right up against the higher density component, is there any concern about, because there seems to be kind of a buffer, I don't know, like where that corner is on Zone 4, it just looks like real.
Are you talking about where the purple runs into the yellow?
Yeah, and I guess I'm just kind of still understanding entirely where the overlay, how deep it goes in.
Yeah, if you look at the, what I have up on the screen, that purple area that's showing is, as you can see, it has fuzzy lines. This has fuzzy lines as well when we get into the graphics on this. And so I don't think the intent was to have the purple and the yellow overlapping the purple. I think it's just a matter of when you fuzz out the lines on this is kind of where it ends up. And we're also using some existing graphics. So, but the intent isn't to confuse matters on that corner. It's essentially, it can't be both, right? So the yellow lower density would apply to that area.
Yeah, there's no.
Go ahead.
There's not a dimensional standard on the yellow. It's the first row. So, whatever the dimension of a house or a duplex would be. And then you can kind of transition up. So the goal is still to have that transition in that area. It just might be, maybe it's a house and then a townhome and then a larger building. Whereas in other areas, it's wider. And so there's more, room to transition. But in this, it's a bit closer.
Yeah, and I think it's largely a part of just the blur factor on that purple area. And when we overlaid manually the yellow line on it to represent the first row of low density overlay, that's where it wound up.
Yeah, absolutely. It just seems, it's just a unique space in terms of the whole, property because of the fact that that little chunk of purple, so to speak, curves out into zone 4 right there. And so it seems to be kind of a unique part of the space. But that makes sense, Scott, about how that would be determined by the first line of development. And then my last question is if you could, so Subdistrict 1 has, some different permitted uses as opposed to, say, 4, and they're both exterior, elements of the redevelopment. And I'm just, I understand kind of the existing nature of some of how 4 is kind of in closer proximity to different uses, probably on that edge. But is that essentially the reason why some of the commercial distinctions and some of the non-permitted uses are so different between 1 and 4, even though they're both kind of exterior?
Yes, exactly. And zone 4 actually includes some of that exempted area for height and density. So we didn't want to totally exclude commercial uses from zone 4, but a lot of those commercial uses are conditional, which means it's, maybe they're only appropriate in certain areas. I don't think the 2 and 3 are way more intense than 4, but yeah, there's definitely some more in 4 just because those heat maps, retail might be appropriate in that north part of 4, whereas it's not at all appropriate in 1. And so we have to kind of, 4 is, I guess, between 2 and 3, 4 is between the zones in terms of intensity. It's not a 1, but it's not a 2 and a 3.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it, gets developed with some of that variety. Okay, that's all I had. Thanks. This is really exciting. Thanks.
Commissioner Moore.
No questions.
Commissioner Quinn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Scott and Jana, for bringing this to us tonight. I have a couple. So I know, Scott, when you were talking about like zone 1, the garages wouldn't face like Dudley. So it'd be like an alley or something back there. And so those homes, the traffic would go towards Lutheran Parkway and then out to 38th or 32nd and wherever they go after that, correct?
Yes, so the primary access would come from the east. We do potentially have to allow for some vehicular access onto Dudley in the form of an alley for fire-related reasons or a trash truck, but it would be very circuitous for someone to cut through. It would only essentially be to garages. It wouldn't be a through street.
Right, and I think there's some places like that up off a ridge in that development up there. I delivered dog food there for a friend. I'm like, wow, this is kind of unique. Cool. And so the yellow line, and I think maybe this confused perhaps a lot of people. Those yellow lines, they're not like specific houses. It's like a strip of land that can only be used for like single family. And then you go further to the east, then that will be townhouses or whatnot until you get to Lutheran. And then that's when we have larger buildings, correct?
Yes, that's
okay.
correct.
So, yeah. One last thing, and I was at the rec center and was in a, I don't want to say heated discussion, but it was interesting. Some folks living on the north side of 38th are very concerned about people cutting through on whatever streets are, Dudley and whatever else, all the way through. And I guess, is there going to be any plan to restrict, or I know it's public roadway, yada, yada, but to, maybe discourage people from going down those roads and trying to get to 44th, or instead of going where they should down 38th to Kipling or Wadsworth, and if not, how would these folks ask for help?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And I think that, from the Wadsworth project, the cut through traffic, I've even been guilty of it.
Is horrific.
I know it's horrific. And You know, they are public streets, so it's not like we can say, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to drive on these. But I think, number one, with Wadsworth getting cleared up, I think that having 3 lanes there in each direction is going to be, it's going to really open it up. And I don't think people are going to want to take the time to cut through. That would be my hope. The second thing is that as the project builds out, I think that, you know, I don't know what the exact plans are for 38th. Are there ways to not restrict, but dissuade people from cutting through the neighborhoods there? Maybe. Being that it's a public roadway, that would probably be something that we'd look at as part of a traffic calming or some type of project like that through Public Works. But I don't have any plans, and I don't have any plans in my mind that I can envision right now that come to mind for that area, because we really just aren't entirely sure how this is going to develop out. We know that once the zoning is placed down and once the master developer is selected, which we do not know that yet, the site, once it goes under the concept plan review, I think one thing that's going to be really helpful is a traffic study will be needed, because it, you know, we anticipate, although we're not traffic engineers ourselves, we anticipate that with all the traffic that was coming and going from the Lutheran Hospital at its full hilt, you know, the traffic will probably be less, but to confirm that, we need to see a traffic study, because I think that that's going to be a big deal. My second question would be, you know, was the cut-through traffic from the hospital really bad, or was it just from it was bad then too? So that, you know, it could be, certainly somebody could request that we look at, but I'd like to see the concept plan a little bit more in detail, and also the traffic study, because I think that that will inform a lot of what the roadways, those roadways in there right now are all private. And so while we can help create better roadways and better connectivity for pedestrians and bicyclists, we need to know what the land uses are going to be, and we also need to know what the traffic impact is going to be in that area before we can really come to a good conclusion about how to handle any cut-through traffic occurring on the north side of 38th. That was a very long-winded answer, but I think that there's just so many things looming out there that we just don't know yet.
Oh, I would agree.
Yeah,
that conversation that I had is burned in my head, and I
think I had some conversations
probably
with the
had
folks
many
on the
too,
north side of 38th as well.
Yeah.
I know.
And Scott, a couple more real quick. You said that it was like there's 20% of this land is dedicated to an open space, correct?
Yeah, so 20% is publicly accessible open space. There will actually be a much higher percentage of landscaping, but 20% is publicly accessible, which is pretty unprecedented, honestly, in the city.
Right, and then the buildings on the interior, those areas with the multi-use, they'll have a green space or something like that that's added into it, right?
Yeah, and we're not counting that private open space, like, you know, apartment pool or a rooftop deck or something. And same way we wouldn't count someone's backyard towards that public, but it'll still technically be landscaping or open space.
Cool. All right, thank you very much. It was well put together and appreciate it.
Commissioner Shelkey.
No questions.
I have a couple of questions. In zone 4, the drug rehab facility, has the city possibly considered using that for their offices? That seems like it would be big enough.
Yeah, you're talking about West Pines?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we have not looked at that, and part of the reason is that from our discussions with whomever, I don't have the particulars on that, but apparently that facility, you know, they're moving to, what is it, Westminster or Broomfield, but the condition inside is much, much worse than it appears from the outside. And so there is not an intent to have that building repurposed for a different use. because of the condition.
And then I saw a comment on Facebook from a citizen who was saying, yay, it passed, but will the city not acquiesce to a developer's wishes that go against this zoning? And I just want to know how that process evolves.
Yeah, no, and throughout the process that the brokers had this listed for the hospital, the interested parties have, potentially interested master developers have been in contact with us, and they have understood the philosophy and the intent behind the master plan, and we haven't had any concerns raised over that. So number one, I don't see that that would be an issue. Number two, you've got the 2018, 2021, whatever it is, adopted master plan that then will have the zoning layered on top of it. You've got kind of a double bookend of here's what you need to do and here's what the zoning regulations say. And it's like any other zoning. If it says, thou shalt do this, it has to be followed. If for some reason, let's say that we get to a point where the master developer, we're at a concept plan and they say this just isn't going to work here, or we want to move that or whatever, they would have to, if they were going to try to change anything significantly, they would actually have to come back through, it would have to comply with the zoning. I don't foresee us saying, yeah, we'd entertain and, some idea of rezoning the property to something else. But then they would also have to come back with a new concept plan.
Can you hold that thought? We're going to have to take about a 10-minute recess. We've lost our feed on Channel 8. And we
recess
to
then.
reboot. We need to reboot.
All right, please, the meeting is in recess. Technical difficulties, and at the time we learned of it, our head planner was discussing how the developer would adhere to the zoning plan. So Jana, would you please explain that again?
No problem. Thank you. So if the developer was insistent, the master developer was insistent that they did not want to comply with the plans, that would be difficult because we wouldn't want to entertain a rezoning. That's the reason that we're rezoning it to mixed use LLC. And then we have the two documents. We've got the campus master plan, we've got the zoning regulations. And so between those, there's a requirement that they comply with the zoning regulations. The master plan will give us direction, but the zoning regulations are the rules in which they must follow. And then on third layer onto that is the concept plan. And so if something came up and the master developer, say, wanted to change the concept plan, it would have to go through that process again. So that's why the concept plan is so important, and those are done with mixed-use sites that are greater than 10 acres. And so with this being, 80-plus acres, it's a good way to get a good read on what types of uses might go in each area and how the connectivity is going to work and things like that. But they would have to go back through that.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from commissioners? Do we have any other new business? Is this the end of your presentation, or do we need?
This is the end of this item, which I believe was item number A under new business. For upcoming dates, I can move on into that if you'd like, Madam Chair. So for upcoming dates, we will have a meeting on the 21st of November. And then right now we have scheduled meetings on December 5th and December 19th. So unless we hear otherwise, we do have them scheduled. So if you're unable to make it, please let us know. Let's see here. Project and development updates. I don't have any new updates. Scott mentioned that the Outlook 2 received their final CO, which is the apartments, the second phase of apartments up there near the hospital. So that was, what, a couple of weeks ago? And the only other thing I'll mention is, as everybody knows, that 2B and 2C both passed. So we're very excited about that and excited to move this project forward. Other than that, those are all the updates I have.
Do we have any commissioner updates? I have 2 items, or 1 item. Yeah. I'm a member of an art co-op called The Art Spot, and we're having our member show this Saturday from 5 to 9, and it's at the Methodist Church there on 38, where the Wheat Ridge Cultural Center has evolved to. It's free to the public, and please come. And then I just wanted to congratulate staff on crossing the finish line on 2B and 2C. I know everybody worked really hard on it, and you had to endure some difficult conversations and meetings. I saw Jana at one of the open houses, and I wanted to dive in and rescue you because you were surrounded by at least 15 to 20 people who were all talking to you at the same time. So you handled that very well. Thank you so very much for enduring that. I have been a part of a lot of processes with the city in the last 12 years. And the process involving this project, I feel, was transparent. The city did everything in their power that they could to inform the citizenry and include the citizenry in the design of this. And I was just so dismayed when there was so much flack and pushback from people who had a lot of misinformation given to them. So thank you for hanging in there and being professional, as everybody on the staff is. You guys do a wonderful job. Any other comments from commissioners? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
May I have a second?
Second.
Commissioners vote.
Motion approved, 7-0.
Meeting adjourned.